Hey, what's up, people? Pizowell here, and today I want to talk to you guys about 1984's The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, written and directed by the late, great Wes Craven. Now, this is partially going to be a review of the movie, as well as a review of this upcoming Arrow Video Limited Edition Blu-ray release for the film. And The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 focuses on a motocross team who are going out to some sort of competition. I'm not sure what exactly, to try out this new super fuel that they've come across, but along the way they decide to take a shortcut through the desert, because taking shortcuts through the desert historically have always led to really good things. It has never been a bad idea to take a shortcut through the desert until now, because this motocross team run afoul of Pluto from the original Hills Have Eyes, played again by Michael Berryman, and he is accompanied by Papa Jupe's older brother, the Reaper, and carnage ensues. Now, The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 is an interesting movie. I've seen this film at least 5 or 6 times at this point, and every time I go into it, I hope that there's something there that I can latch onto that will make me like this movie, because there are elements of this movie that I should like. However, The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 is such a dull, by-the-book slasher movie with really paper-thin characters, and it just feels like an incomplete movie. It feels like an abandoned movie. The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 came along at an interesting time in Wes Craven's career. It was post Last House on the Left and the original Hills Have Eyes, but it was pre Nightmare on Elm Street, although this film was released after the success of Nightmare on Elm Street. Basically, Craven needed cash. The successes of Last House and the original Hills Have Eyes really didn't open any doors for him. And before this film, he had directed Swamp Thing, which didn't turn out the way that he wanted and didn't perform very well at the box office. So Craven needed some cash. The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 is the product of Craven needing some cash. And you can tell literally from the opening sequence of this film that Wes Craven's heart was just not in The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. This is a sequel to a movie that really did not require a sequel. This is a movie that is very much a slasher movie. As a matter of fact, I don't think that Pluto and the Reaper in this movie are even cannibals. They don't talk about eating people. They talk about killing people and dumping their bodies down mine shafts. This is very much a product of the early 80s. It is a slasher movie through and through. It looks like an early 80s slasher movie. It feels like an early 80s slasher movie. It definitely sounds like an early 80s slasher movie because Harry Manfredini did the score, and I think he pretty much just brought Wes Craven the Friday the 13th tapes and said, here, throw those onto The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, because the music is pretty much identical to Friday the 13th minus kick, kick, ma, ma, ma. And even though I love early 80s slasher movies, even some quite bad early 80s slasher movies, at least those movies feel like there's some effort put into them. There's just not a lot of effort put into this movie on really any level. The story is just as basic as it gets. The characters are as paper thin as they get. They feel just really interchangeable. It's your standard set them up and knock them down kind of slasher movie. But an early 80s slasher movie with just no energy. Even the kills in this movie are pretty tame. Quite a few of them happen off screen. There is a nice throat slashing moment in the movie that has pretty cool practical makeup effect. But other than that, there's not a lot going on in that arena either. And when I said that The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 feels like an abandoned movie, that's because it was. Toward the end of production, they ran into money issues and they just stopped shooting. After the huge success of A Nightmare on Elm Street, they went back to The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, and to pad out that runtime, they just threw in a bunch of flashbacks to the original film, including a flashback from the dog's point of view. The dog has a flashback in this movie. I can't necessarily say that I like The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, despite the fact that I've seen the film 5 or 6 times, and I can definitely see myself watching it again in the future. There's something about it, I'm not sure exactly what that is, that just keeps me coming back to The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. This is a film that, if you look back over Wes Craven's career, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Yes, it was a paycheck gig, but all of the big horror directors at some point or another in their career did their paycheck gigs. So I don't think this movie necessarily besmirches Wes Craven's career. It's definitely a movie that not a lot of people talk about. I know Wes Craven disowned it. As a matter of fact, I think most of the people that worked on The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 have disowned it. But it has a pretty sizable following of people who love this movie. I can kind of meet you halfway, but I don't know, maybe after the 8th, 9th, 10th time of watching The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, I'll maybe at that point, something will jump out in this movie that just, I don't know. I can't in good conscience recommend The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. If my review of the film has piqued your interest, by all means, go out and check it out. This Blu-ray release from Arrow Video would be a great way to introduce yourself to the film. If you are a fan of The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, you definitely want to look into picking up this limited edition Blu-ray release from Arrow Video and add it to your collection. First, let's check out the presentation here. Everything comes inside a really nice, sturdy, thick cardboard case. You've got some new artwork there, which is very nice. Inside the case, we have the Blu-ray release itself, the case of which features the new artwork for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. The reverse features the old school artwork for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. And inside the Blu-ray release, we have several stills from The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. This release comes with a booklet featuring 2 write-ups on The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. The first entitled The Hills Have Heart by Amanda Reyes, and the other on the set, The Hills Have Eyes 2 by Johnny Legend. This booklet also includes some very nice full-color images from the film. And lastly, this release includes a reversible poster. On one side, we have the newly commissioned artwork for the film, and on the reverse, we have the old school artwork for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. As far as picture quality and sound quality are concerned, this Blu-ray release features a brand new 2K restoration from the original film elements. The picture quality, I thought, was absolutely fantastic. I would give it a 4, if not a 4.5 out of 5. The movie looked great. The movie also sounded great. I would give the audio quality, again, a 4 or a 4.5 out of 5. The film looked great and sounded great on this release. As far as extras are concerned, first up, we have Blood, Sand, and Fire, the making of The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. It's 31 minutes and 16 seconds in length. It features interviews with producer Peter Locke, actors Michael Berryman and Janice Blythe, production designer Dominic Bruno, composer Harry Manfredini, and unit production manager and first assistant director John Callis. Peter Locke discusses working with Wes Craven on the first Hills Have Eyes. Berryman discusses the impact of the first film on his career. They discuss working with Wes Craven, the movie having no budget, the harsh conditions of shooting on location in the Joshua Tree Park. They discuss the abundance of flashbacks in the film, including the dog's flashback. Manfredini discusses Craven asking him to score the film. Locke discusses how the film was never quite finished and how Craven's heart wasn't in the film. They also discuss Craven's legacy as a filmmaker and much more. Very nice making of for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. We also get a still gallery, the original trailer, and an audio commentary with The Hysteria Continues. I listened to about a half an hour of the commentary. The Hysteria Continues commentaries are always pretty entertaining, and this one was no different. Very entertaining commentary, at least for about the 30 minutes that I listened to for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. This is a very nice limited edition Blu-ray release for The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 from the fine folks over at Arrow Video. If you're a fan of The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, you definitely want to look into picking up this Blu-ray and adding it to your collection. The picture quality and the sound quality are both fantastic. The presentation is great. You've got some nice extras on this release. You've got a very nice booklet and a really cool poster. This is a must if you are a fan of The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. I'll post a link to Arrow Video's website in the description. Go over and check them out. If you've seen The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, please let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments section below. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up. If you're not following me on social media, those links are in the description. They're also right around here. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care, and until next time, peace. Join the $1 a Month Club and help support my channel on Patreon. Thank you to my current patrons, Kevin Smythe, Orc145626, B-Movie Mike, Robert Sobel, Turi Delamore, Stephen Flanagan, Lori Holt, Craig Farrand, Farron Sutton, Jeremiah Lambert, Grindhouse Grotto, Derek Jana, Demon Waffles, Simon Clark, Stone Gassman, Zachary Barton, Lauren Dixon, James Welch, Eli Geisler, Jeff Overing, Pete Toll, Kyle McGuire, Jay the Stingray, Andrew McDonald, Dave Barnes, Jonathan Lundy, Chris Gonzalez, Trenton Bowser, Jason Breitenbach, Brandon Bisdick, Steak Sauce, OG Myers, Mark Striano, Jeff Gardner, Travis Davis, The Obsoletionist, and Chris Earls. Say hello to the internet, Jeremy.
Hello to the internet.